Everyone, by popular demand, I'm going to do a quick speed review of Coinbase versus River versus Strike versus Swan. The reason I haven't done this video before, even though people have asked for it, is there's no way to do it justice at all. So massive, take all of this with a massive pile of salt in that I'm just going to hit a few highlights off the top of my head, and this is not a comprehensive review. It's just not, and there's no good way to do a comprehensive review. Okay, so let's dive in. So the overall winner from all of these is Coinbase. Uh, net, Coinbase is far ahead of the other competitors on almost every vector, with a couple very minor exceptions, which I will talk about. Additionally, even though I put Swan as one of the options in the list, it is the company I know the least about. And I mean, there's been a number of headlines. They're in a big lawsuit with Tether. There was another lawsuit related to something. I think they raised a bunch of money, but it was debt financing. Anyway, I have not had time to explore their product, and I have not had time to get to the bottom of some of the lawsuits and negative headlines that have come out related to Swan in the past year. And so I am not going to review Swan other than to say, do your own research, figure out what's really going on with the whole tether mining thing, what's going on with, debt financing and, to the degree to which they have the ability to service that debt, all that sort of stuff. So do your own research on Swan. They're a Bitcoin only company, which I love, just like River, just like Strike, but do your own research. Okay. So, let's start with these three companies, the three remaining companies, which are Coinbase, River, and Strike. The reason I organized them in that order for the first three is because that is the order of how favorable you can get the fees as it relates to converting Bitcoin into and out of US dollars. Coinbase is by far, in all the situations that I, find myself, they are by far the cheapest way to buy, sell, and spend Bitcoin, just by far. Now, a big caveat here is each of the companies have their own special deals. So Coinbase One, which costs $30 a month, gives you like no trading fees and, some other stuff like that. River and Strike also have various special deals about recurring transactions. Or I don't think Strike or River has a subscription. But anyway, all that to say, in certain situations, some of the other platforms could give you, uh, you know, fees or stuff that are better than Coinbase or comparable to Coinbase. But for someone like me, who, when I want to move Bitcoin around, when I want to move US dollars around, when I want to convert in and out, I do that on the fly. I don't have the recurring buys I get is every time there's basically any money in my bank account, it immediately, I buy it, buy Bitcoin on Coinbase with it. So, for someone like me, I don't have a good way of doing recurring buys because my world is up and down enough on a daily basis that I just don't have a good way of doing that. So for all of those reasons, the caveat here is I'm going to speak about these services as I use them, and how I use them is moving money in and out when I need it, wiring money in and out of, bank accounts if I have to, whatever. And so that's the perspective I'm speaking from. Okay. So with that, let's talk about fees. So typically, when I'm moving money around into or out of Bitcoin on Coinbase, I'm getting fees in the ballpark of between 0.25 and 0.4%. And I do it in Coinbase Advanced, so there's no spread. Spread is a technical term that companies charge to lock in a price when you're using a simplified user interface. That keeps people from basically pretending they're about to buy Bitcoin, and then if the price changes in the minute while it locked in the price, they just cancel the trade and they just keep doing that over and over to try to get better price Bitcoin. So a spread is basically Coinbase locks it in and they say, look, if you want to buy Bitcoin, great. But if you're using the simple user interface, the price you pay for the Bitcoin price is 1% higher. That way it gives the Bitcoin the ability to fluctuate by 1% in the time it takes to execute the purchase or in the time it takes to process it by your bank. So when I'm buying or selling Bitcoin, I'm using Coinbase Advanced, which eliminates that 1% spread. But it also means that you have to have the money on Coinbase, which is extra technical. So if you want to learn about that, watch my video about it's Coinbase Advanced. Do a keyword search on my Facebook page for Coinbase Advanced between quote marks. So quote mark, Coinbase Advanced, end quote. and you'll find it anyway. So I'm usually paying zero spread and a fee of between, in a sort of month where I've got relatively low volume of in and out of Bitcoin. I'm paying a fee of 0.4%. If I'm moving larger amounts of Bitcoin around, or not moving around, I should say, moving larger amounts into or out of US dollars for some reason, I'm typically paying a fee of 0.25%. So between 0.25 and 0.4%. Those are fantastic cheap fees. Nothing else gets you even close. So on the list, I guess I put them in order of I guess I reversed the order on fees. Forgive me. But the next closest is Strike, Strike. So the fees kick in for the kind of transactions I would do at around 0.7 to 0.8%. So I'm getting, instead of on Coinbase 0.25 to 0.4% fees, on Strike, I'm getting let's call it 0.7 to zero point 0.8. And maybe if I'm lucky and doing a bunch of stuff, zero point 0.6. Regardless, those fees are 2 to 3 times as high on Strike as on Coinbase, which again, it really adds up when you're sort of moving, large amounts in or out of Bitcoin. Right. So now, if you think, well, then, why would anybody use Strike? Well, I'll get to that. But um, River is even worse. River, the fees on River are abysmal. Their fees for moving into or out of Bitcoin for any amount less than $500,000 are 1%. So you're getting a 1% fee no matter what on anything less than $500,000. And on top of that, they have a spread of between zero point 0.2 and 0.5%. Now, again, as compared to Bitcoin's 1% spread, the spread is lower, but then again, you're getting a 1% fee. So maybe the fees on River are comparable to Coinbase in the simple user interface, but they're not anywhere close if you switch to the advanced user interface for Coinbase. So in my case, I was playing around with River for one of my nonprofits, and I'll tell you the reason I was doing that. Um, uh, the I did some small transactions, and the total transaction fee plus the spread on River came in between 1.3 and 1.4%, which is ridiculous, ridiculous fees. So ultimately, I, I mean, I'm planning to use River for some small stuff, and I'll explain why in a minute here. But for being a major account that I use for what I normally do, the fees on River are I just can't use River. I'm not going to pay 1.3 to 1.4% to move in and out of Bitcoin. Now, Strike is more manageable. Strike is, again, call it zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8. That's manageable. There's no spread. Strike does not charge a spread. They build the spread into their fee. So there's no additional spread to confuse you or muddle the issue. So, but again, Strike. I would argue is the way Strike does their fees are not as good as Coinbase, or I should say, not as good as Coinbase Advanced, but cheaper than the simple user interface of Coinbase. But I would say Strike's fees are acceptable. River's fees are excessive enough that it's an impediment with me recommending River to anybody, because I'm like, I can't have them come back to me and say, Joel, 1.3 to 1.4% to move in and out of Bitcoin. Like, are you crazy? It's too high. And in my opinion, River is losing money because their fees are so high. Because people like me who, would use them in certain situations are just not willing to pay fees that high. I'm just not going to do it. So they're missing out on people like me for large volumes of moving in and out of US dollars versus Bitcoin, because people like me are not going to pay those fees. We'll pay Strike fees, but we're not going to pay River fees. Okay. So why am I even talking about Strike and River? Well, for one, the one caveat, or the two caveats related to Coinbase, is Coinbase does not yet have bill pay, and they used to have direct deposit, and they're planning on reintroducing it at some point, but they don't have it right now. So, I guess it's three caveats. The first two are they do not have direct deposit, and they do not have bill pay. But Coinbase does have the Coinbase debit card, which is a million times better than anything else as far as spending Bitcoin, and nothing else that has the debit card. So the fact that Coinbase has a debit card makes it far superior than Strike or River, because they don't have a debit card. But Coinbase does not yet have bill pay or direct deposit, or they used to have direct deposit. They're going to bring it back at some point, but you do not have direct deposit on Coinbase right now. So as a result of that, if you need direct deposit or if you want to do bill pay, you just can't do that on Coinbase right now. You just can't. So even though Coinbase as a whole is much better than the other services because their fees are a lot lower, specifically in Coinbase Advanced, but especially because they have the Coinbase debit card, and just it's a publicly traded company, it's, et cetera, et cetera. There's a huge, on net, Coinbase is much better than the other alternatives, but it would seal the deal if it had, it would be 100% better in all scenarios if the feeds on Coinbase were lower in the standard user interface. Although I understand why they're not. I understand why there's a 1% spread because they have to, keep people from trying to game the system. Anyway, but net Coinbase is infinitely or is much better, but they don't have bill pay and they don't have direct deposit right now. Although I hope both of those are coming. Okay, the other caveat with Coinbase is getting a business account or getting a nonprofit account is very difficult and very time consuming. So the most recent nonprofit account I got with Coinbase took about 6 weeks. On River and Strike, you can get a nonprofit or a business account in about 4 days. And the reason I even bothered to try was the getting the account on Coinbase was taking so long. Literally, it took 6 weeks. That in the course of those 6 weeks, I thought, this is insane. I cannot believe how long this is taking. And the total number of questions I'm being asked to respond to and the total amount of paperwork I got asked to respond to get a business or nonprofit account on Coinbase, it got so sort of ridiculously long that I thought this could not possibly has to take this long. So I signed up for an account on Strike and an account on River just to see how long they took. And in both cases, I had a fully functional nonprofit business account in 4 days. So it's 4 days versus 6 weeks. The easiest was Strike. You just upload the paperwork, and 4 days later, you get the email that says, "Congratulations, you have a business account." But in the case of River, there was a little bit of back and forth via email about additional documents they needed and stuff like that, but it was still pretty painless. And I still think it took like, I don't know, four days, or maybe it took like a week and a half at most. But anyway, so the short take is, and the other thing is, Coinbase charges a $1,000 non-refundable application fee for business and nonprofit accounts. That is a very high hurdle for small businesses or small nonprofits to pay $1,000 just to apply to get a Coinbase account for a business or nonprofit. Now, again, none of that applies to an individual. It's just business or nonprofit accounts. And if you're a medium or large size business, so what? It's $1,000 and you spend 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks getting the account. Who cares? And then you're good. If you're a small nonprofit with limited resources and you don't have the time to go back and forth and track down a gazillion pieces of paperwork and answer an insane number of questions, if you don't have time to do that, then River and Strike offer you zero, if there's no cost to apply for a business or nonprofit account with Strike or with River. Okay, so given all that, you may be wondering, okay, I get it. If I need a business or nonprofit account and I don't want to pay $1,000 with Coinbase and I don't want to answer 1,000 questions and I don't want to wait, 4 to 8 weeks, then use River or Strike. But why River or Strike? What's the difference there? One second. Well, the fees on Strike are twice as good. So you might be thinking, why do I even bring up River at all if the fees on Strike are twice as good? The answer is because the app on River is much better than the Strike app. The Strike app looks like it was written by it looks like the user interface was written by the back-end software developers. So normally you have back-end software developers that make things work, and then you have front-end software developers that make things pretty. Strike's app, it feels like the back-end software developers also wrote the front end. Now, it's not bad. It's just when you compare the River app and the Strike app, and the user interface experience, River is much better. Like, River is much more logical. The flow makes sense. It's easier to find stuff. Both of them are very minimalistic, and both of them use only dark mode, which I don't like. I think for consumer apps, you want white, you want light colors, you want, inviting sort of aura, and Strike and River both use dark mode only. So the backgrounds on both apps are black, and then Strike's color, I guess, is black, and River's color is brown. But regardless, both apps just have this sort of very dark look. That being said, the user interface, the flow, the ease of which you do stuff and finding stuff in the River app is way better than the Strike app. So that being said, I love Jack Mallers, the founder of Strike. He's a very ideologically aligned Bitcoiner, and I hope over time Strike will make their app friendlier and more user friendly. Because right now, again, it's not bad. It's so minimalistic that you're always going to be able to figure out what you need to do. But there's just some aspects of it that I'm like, okay, River's app is just a lot better. Like, it's just straight up a lot better on River. The River app is a lot better. Also, I like the fact that River and Strike are Bitcoin only. So the one, downside with Coinbase is the whole time you're trying to buy Bitcoin, they're offering to sell you every random worthless coin on the planet, and that confuses people. So with River and with Strike, it's Bitcoin only, so you don't have to worry about being distracted with a bunch of coins that are worthless. It's just Bitcoin. That's the only thing River and Strike do. So to recap, Coinbase is definitely better overall, with the caveats that they don't yet have bill pay and they don't currently have direct deposit. But they do have a Coinbase debit card, and with Coinbase Advanced, the fees are lower than you're going to get anywhere else. And they got some really cool stuff with Coinbase One and all of that. And the user interface in Coinbase is pretty straightforward, although it's cluttered with all the extra sort of junk tokens that you should not buy. So overall, Coinbase wins. Other than Coinbase, Strike is a lot better on fees than River, but River is a lot better on user experience and user interface. Both Strike and River take about the same amount of time to get a business or nonprofit account. Again, Coinbase charges $1,000 to even apply for a business or nonprofit account. And in the case of Coinbase, the process is a very, very arduous, very, very painful 4 to 6 weeks answering 1,000 questions and uploading a gazillion documents. And in truth, it's probably 20 or 30 questions, and it's, I don't know, you know, 12 to 24 documents. But regardless, that's a lot. That's pretty painful, having been through it on the Coinbase side. Again, on the River and Strike side, much more elegant. There's no cost to get a business or nonprofit account. Very elegant. And if I had to pick the best user interface experience of all of them, it'd be River, because they don't have all the extra coins of Coinbase. And I really like the way the app layout of River. I just wish River would be, I wish they would flip it to light mode instead of dark mode, or at least follow the settings of your phone instead of having dark mode as the only option on River. And they ought to start in light mode. I think people like light mode, other than like techie software developers and techie people. I think everybody generally prefers light mode, not dark mode. So I really like the user interface of River. Like the fee structure of Strike, if you can't get the fee structure of Coinbase. Coinbase's fee structure is much better if you're in Coinbase Advanced. Coinbase is the overall winner, and for consumers, because they don't need a business or nonprofit account, you don't have to deal with the time or the difficulty of getting a business or nonprofit account on Coinbase, which means then the only downsides on the Coinbase side are no direct deposit, no bill pay, and the fact that you have to deal with all these extra coins that are confusing you while you try to find Bitcoin, the real thing, which is the only thing you should buy anyway. So I like the River user interface. I like the Strike fee structure, although overall Coinbase wins just because, again, it's significantly lower fees than Coinbase Advanced. They got the debit card, and it's a big publicly traded company that can basically handle anything. And, no matter how you allocate the points on that, you're going to end up with Coinbase as a winner. Again, unless you need a business or nonprofit account, in which case it comes down to, do you want the difficulty and the $1,000 up front, which you do get back over time. It's an offset against like trading fees. So in Coinbase, if you're going to do a lot of stuff on Coinbase, you do get that $1,000 back over time. But a lot of businesses and nonprofits don't want to put up $1,000 just to apply for an account that they may or may not get. That's non-refundable, and with the difficulty and time associated with getting a Coinbase business account or nonprofit account. So hopefully that helps. Again, I did not do any of these services justice because this is all just off the top of my head, poorly organized information, but enough people have asked me over time, Well, what about River? What about Strike? How do they compare to Coinbase? Then at least I wanted to data dump off the top of my head what I think. Um, and if I could make one wish from this, other than I think Coinbase is going to do the stuff they're doing, it would be River, you got to lower your fees. Your fees are too high, River. They're too high. You need to mimic the fee structure of Strike. Strike always gives you the better fees. If you buy $1,000 of Bitcoin, you don't get screwed with the $250 and below fees. So on Strike, not only do they give you the better fees based on the most Bitcoin you spend, they don't like ding you at the lower tier, and then you have to wait for a second transaction to get the higher tiers. So not only does Strike do a better job, but because if you buy however much Bitcoin you buy, they give you the best fee structure at that price. They don't ding you with the lower fee structures for the initial purchases. And then also the Strike fee structure does not have a spread and is a lot simpler, straightforward, and lower than what's on River. So if anybody's from River and is watching this, River, please lower your fees. They're ridiculously high. The fees plus the spread is ridiculously high. River, you could make more money by lowering your fees because people like me would not use, I would not have to turn people away from River because I just can't, in good faith, recommend River, when they're going to get hit with a 1.3%, 1.4% fee plus spread. That's crazy. Get it, get in line with, or at least side by side with Strike. Strike's fees are at least manageable, even if they're not as good as Coinbase. They're at least manageable. River, your fees are too high. Fix your fees. Strike, please turn on light mode and make your app more like Rivers because Strike, your app looks like it was written by a back-end software developer, not a front-end software developer. Please, your app could be a lot cleaner, not cleaner because it's already minimalistic, but your your app could be friendlier to new people to Bitcoin. Strike, um, River, great job on your app. Your fees are just too high. Coinbase, great job overall because you win. You win the But if anybody from Coinbase is watching this, Coinbase, please. The business and nonprofit application process is so onerous. It's really hard for people to get through. So hard for people to get through that it's hard to recommend because for small nonprofits and small businesses, they just don't have the legal and accounting apparatus to check all of the boxes that are required and answer, dozens of questions. It's a really onerous process on the Coinbase side for business and nonprofits. So anyway, again, take all this with a grain of salt. These are just my musings on a drive, taking my dog to the groomers. And I figured I might as well fit in a video while I'm taking my dog to the groomers. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.